She marched into my backyard like she owned it, pointing at my private pool and shouting, "This is HOA property now." What she didn't know is I had the legal documents, the cameras, and a plan that would leave her humiliated and dry. The problems began with a letter that seemed, at first glance, like routine HOA communication. Folded into a cheap envelope with the HOAS logo, the message inside struck an unexpected tone. It wasn't a friendly reminder or a maintenance update. It was an official notice stating that, effective immediately, the backyard pool located at Lot 17 is to be made available for community use under the HOA Shared Amenities Policy. That sentence alone was enough to make blood boil. The pool wasn't part of any community agreement. It was a private installation paid for entirely out of pocket with permits, receipts, and inspections properly filed and documented. It wasn't part of any common area, wasn't funded by HOA dues, and was located squarely on deeded private property. Confusion quickly turned to concern, and concern to frustration. A call to the HOA office yielded nothing helpful. The receptionist couldn't provide an explanation and simply recommended attending the next board meeting for clarification. No one seemed willing to say who approved this outrageous change or how it had slipped into policy unnoticed. The only thing made clear was that enforcement would begin within the month, meaning the pool would be scheduled for events and social functions without the owner's consent. This wasn't just unreasonable, it was a blatant overreach. A review of the property deed and title documents confirmed what was already known. The pool was entirely private, part of a fenced-in backyard with no mention of any shared easement or communal designation. There was no legal basis for the HOA's claim. Even the county zoning maps clearly showed the boundaries of the lot, with the pool located well within those lines. There was no ambiguity, no legal gray area. This was a power play, digging deeper into the HOA board's recent changes revealed something more disturbing. The HOA had recently appointed a new acting president, Karen Whitmore. Known in the neighborhood as controlling, nosy, and power-hungry, Karen had long complained about unfair advantages among homeowners. She was vocal about equal access and had a reputation for rewriting rules midway through disputes. Now, with her newfound authority, she appeared to be trying to stretch the HOA's reach far beyond its legal limits. Karen's personal feud with several residents was no secret, but this attempt to seize a homeowner's private pool under the guise of community benefit was an escalation. This wasn't about fairness. This was personal. She had often made sarcastic comments during HOA meetings about homeowners who thought they were above everyone else because of their amenities. She had made it her mission to balance the scales, and now it seemed she was using her position to punish success. Several other residents began reporting strange behavior as well. One neighbor shared that Karen had been taking photos over backyard fences. Another mentioned that Karen had complained about his deck shade blocking the community sunlight. Her reach was extending far beyond her mandate. But while most homeowners found her irritating, very few were willing to challenge her directly. She was aggressive, litigious, and unrelenting, with the clock ticking on the so-called enforcement of this pool policy. It became clear that this situation would escalate. Legal advice was sought, and a local property attorney quickly confirmed that the HOAS letter held no legal weight. The documents Karen claimed as justification for her decision were not binding and could easily be overturned in court. Still, lawsuits cost time, energy, and money, something Karen likely knew. She was counting on intimidation and exhaustion to get her way. The threat wasn't legal. It was social warfare. Attempts to speak directly with Karen were met with smug indifference. She dismissed concerns, saying things like, "You'll come around once you see how fun the parties are," or "This is about community spirit, not individual greed." She framed herself as a champion of neighborhood unity even as she bulldozed over private rights. Every interaction made her intentions clearer. This wasn't just about a party. It was about making an example of someone. The HOA's website soon listed a community pool kickoff event to be held at the property, complete with games, food trucks, and open invitations. It was all done without permission. No permits were requested, no insurance waivers filed, and certainly no consent from the homeowner. It was a hostile takeover dressed in community language. As word spread around the neighborhood, reactions were mixed. Some thought it was a generous gesture, unaware of the truth. Others, who knew Karen's history, recognized it as a power move. Close neighbors began asking questions. "Did you really offer your pool to the HOA? Is it true you're hosting a neighborhood party?" The situation had gone from absurd to damaging. Reputation, privacy, and property rights were all under attack. But this wasn't the kind of battle that would be fought with angry letters or ignored warnings. It would require strategy, documentation, and a clear reminder that no one, not even Karen with her self-appointed authority, was above the law. What began with a letter was about to end with consequences Karen never saw coming. The tension finally erupted when Karen crossed the line from written threats to a full-blown invasion of personal space. Just days after the HOA letter circulated, the backyard became the center of unwanted attention. Without prior notice or consent, Karen arrived at the property accompanied by 3 members of the HOA board and what appeared to be a contractor. They entered the backyard through the side gate, which had been left unlocked by a landscaper earlier in the day. No knock on the door, no doorbell, just the sound of voices and footsteps where none should have been. Karen strutted around the pool like she was inspecting a community park, clipboard in hand, making notes and gestures as if she were mapping out a professional venue. One of the board members snapped pictures with a phone while another muttered something about shade tents and amplified sound zones. The contractor appeared to be measuring distances from the pool edge to the patio, seemingly for event setup purposes. It was surreal, offensive, and completely unlawful. When confronted, Karen acted like this was standard procedure. She wore that smug grin she'd become infamous for, the one that radiated arrogance wrapped in fake friendliness. With a breezy tone, she waved off objections and said, "We're just getting a sense of the layout for the HOA's summer schedule. We want to ensure it's safe and accessible for all community members." The word accessible hung in the air like a threat. She even had the nerve to say, "You'll appreciate the goodwill this brings. And don't worry, we'll clean up after the parties." The implication was clear. This wasn't a discussion. Karen had already decided. In her mind, the pool was no longer private property but a public amenity, and her tone made it obvious she believed she had the power to enforce it when challenged. On the legality of her actions, Karen became defensive, repeating vague phrases like HOA authority, collective benefit, and revised community agreements, though she never showed any signed documentation. She insisted that exceptions could no longer be made for individual homeowners who benefit unfairly from exclusive resources. It was the kind of bureaucratic gaslighting only someone drunk on fake power could deliver with a straight face. Neighbors began peeking over fences or watching from their porches, curious about the commotion. Karen didn't seem bothered by the growing attention. In fact, she thrived on it. With every confident step around the backyard, she pushed the narrative that she was the one in charge, that her version of order was inevitable. Her entourage nodded along, some looking unsure but unwilling to challenge her dominance. To make matters worse, Karen started dropping comments about how the pool area could be rearranged. If we move these chairs over here, we'll have more space for the grill station, she said aloud, as though speaking into existence her fantasy of complete control. She pointed to a corner near the fence and said, "That's where the DJ can set up." She even asked the contractor to get a quote for temporary lighting poles. The line between delusion and authority had completely vanished. She wasn't asking, she was claiming. It was clear she had no intention of stopping, and every moment she spent on the property emboldened her further. Any protest was brushed off as overreaction, and any demand for evidence of her right to act this way was met with condescension. Later that day, surveillance footage from multiple angles confirmed everything. The video showed the unauthorized entry, the measurements being taken, the photos being snapped, and Karen acting like she owned the place. The homeowner made several copies of the footage, storing them in different drives and cloud backups. It was no longer about a dispute, it was about building a case. In the following days, neighbors started sharing their own encounters. One couple mentioned how Karen had asked if she could inspect their patio for HOA compliance, despite there being no violations reported. Another homeowner revealed that Karen had been trying to start a petition to revise property usage definitions to allow for more communal use of private amenities. Her goal, it seemed, was to rewrite the rules of the neighborhood to suit her obsession with control. Meanwhile, the homeowner contacted a legal expert on HOA overreach and property rights. The expert confirmed that Karen's actions were not only unethical, but also potentially criminal trespassing, harassment, and intentional misrepresentation of HOA authority could all be grounds for legal action. He recommended documenting every move, preparing cease and desist letters, and even alerting local authorities if further encroachments occurred. But legal action would take time, and Karen was moving fast. The very next day, digital flyers appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group and via email, announcing the first official HOA summer kickoff pool party, set to take place at the private residence without approval. It was scheduled for the upcoming weekend. Karen listed herself as the event host. She even included the homeowner's address, claiming it was generously offered for community bonding. With the flyers making rounds, it became clear that this was more than just a dispute over property. It was a full-blown takeover attempt. Karen wasn't just trying to borrow the pool, she was trying to convert it into HOA territory by force, using social pressure and confusion to steamroll her way into control. But what she didn't realize was that her plan had awakened someone who knew exactly how to dismantle it, piece by piece, legally and tactically. The days following Karen's unauthorized inspection felt like a countdown to disaster. The digital flyers she'd spread across the community painted a fabricated narrative, one where the homeowner had kindly volunteered their pool for the neighborhood's summer kickoff. The bold title read, HOA Pool Party, Family Fun at My Pool, followed by enticing promises of live music, food trucks, inflatable slides, and games for all ages. Nowhere in the flyer was there mention of the event being hosted on private property without permission. Karen had skillfully crafted an illusion of consensus, and people were buying it. Neighbors began stopping by to say thank you for offering the pool. Some even asked whether pets would be allowed or if extra chairs were needed. It was humiliating. The truth had been buried under Karen's well-coordinated lie. She had even created a fake poll in the HOA Facebook group asking what kind of snacks attendees preferred. By framing the event as a community celebration, she painted any dissent as selfish or antisocial. She controlled the optics, and that was more dangerous than any legal gray area. Despite repeated attempts to correct the narrative, many neighbors continued believing Karen's version. Those who didn't agree with her stayed silent, unwilling to publicly go against the HOA president. She had a reputation for retaliation, parking fines, noise complaints, even threats of code violations. Most residents had learned to keep their heads down. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She began walking through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, confirming RSVPs door to door. She talked to families, made suggestions for carpooling, and even arranged for a DJ from her nephew's college to set up sound equipment. She had transformed the event from a casual pool day into a full-blown block party, all staged at a home. She had no right to use. The arrogance reached a new level when a temporary vendor's delivery arrived 3 days before the event. A large crate labeled party equipment was dropped off on the sidewalk near the property tables. Chairs and large plastic tubs meant to be filled with ice and drinks. Karen had sent the delivery team directly to the address without notice. A quick call to the vendor confirmed it had been booked under HOA Summer Planning Committee, with Karen's name as the point of contact. She had gone from hijacking a pool to attempting to stage a full-scale festival. There was no denying the need to take action. Legal counsel was again consulted, and a cease and desist letter was prepared immediately. It outlined Karen's misrepresentations, the lack of consent, and the consequences of any further trespassing or miscommunication. Copies of the security footage were attached. The letter was sent via certified mail to Karen's residence and emailed directly to the entire HOA board. It was a formal line drawn in the sand, but no response came. Not from Karen, not from the board. Instead, Karen posted a smug message in the Facebook group. "We can't wait to see everyone this Saturday. Let's make it a summer to remember. #community first." She even pinned the post to the top of the page. It became clear she had no intention of canceling. If anything, she was trying to provoke. So a backup plan was formed. Legal tools were already in motion, but something more visible was needed, something that would send a clear, undeniable message before things escalated further. The solution came late at night, just hours before the party. The homeowner contacted a professional pool maintenance company and scheduled an emergency service. Full drainage. By sunrise, the crystal blue water was gone. In its place sat a dry concrete shell, clean, empty, and utterly useless for any party plans. Every drop had been pumped out legally and safely within the homeowner's rights. The filtration system was deactivated. Temporary fencing was installed. Around the pool's perimeter, clearly marked with signs that read, "Private property, access denied, event not authorized." Neighbors waking up to the sound of equipment were stunned. Word traveled fast and confusion followed. Some thought the party had been canceled. Others assumed something was wrong with the pool. But as photos began to circulate of the drained pool and new signage, the truth couldn't be hidden anymore. Karen, of course, went ballistic. She was seen pacing the street, shouting on the phone, likely calling vendors and guests, trying to salvage what she could. Her carefully laid narrative was unraveling. She attempted to remove the signs but stopped when a neighbor reminded her she could be filmed. Multiple residents had now witnessed the unauthorized entry days earlier, and whispers of a lawsuit were spreading. Still clinging to control, Karen threatened to call the police, claiming the homeowner had damaged community property and endangered residents. But she failed to understand that nothing about the situation was on her side. Every action she had taken was now documented, every lie, every step onto private land, every public misrepresentation. As the party hour approached, most attendees stayed away. Only a few confused guests showed up, only to be met with the reality. No water, no music, no party, and Karen? She stood there, seething on the sidewalk, as her entire charade collapsed in public view. But the consequences of her arrogance hadn't even started yet. The aftermath of the failed pool party wasn't just embarrassment, it was a public unraveling of Karen's fabricated authority. the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Within 24 hours, photos of the drained pool, the warning signs, and even Karen's red-faced outburst made the rounds on social media and neighborhood group chats. Where once there was silence from those afraid to challenge her, now there was a growing chorus of voices asking the same question. How did she get away with this for so long? The homeowner, armed with legal documentation, security footage, vendor receipts, and written witness statements, formally submitted a complaint not only to the HOA board, but also to the local municipality and the county registrar responsible for HOA oversight. The complaint didn't just mention the trespassing incident. It detailed a months-long pattern of power abuse, overreach, misappropriation of community resources, and willful deception. Karen didn't back down quietly. She retaliated with a flurry of desperate moves. She accused the homeowner of sabotaging a community event, claiming the pool belonged to the spirit of the neighborhood, if not the paperwork. She tried to cite vague clauses from the HOA handbook, misinterpreting vague language about shared spaces and misusing terminology like easement, nuisance clause, and community enhancement initiative. But her arguments crumbled under scrutiny. When pressed for documentation to back her claims, she had none, only circular logic and emotional manipulation. The HOA board, which had remained silent or compliant under her leadership, finally began to fracture. Several members privately reached out to the homeowner, expressing concern and offering apologies. It became clear that Karen had made unilateral decisions, forging consensus by simply asserting it existed. One board member even admitted they were told the homeowner had volunteered the pool and that it had been handled. Another confessed that they had been pressured not to ask questions, fearing retribution in the form of bogus fines or public humiliation. Under growing pressure from the community and a pending legal review, the board called for an emergency session. For the first time in months, residents flooded the HOA clubhouse. The turnout was unlike anything the board had ever seen. People stood in the back. Some brought printed screenshots. Others waved copies of the cease and desist letter. The atmosphere was tense, buzzing with long-suppressed resentment. Karen tried to control the meeting, opening with her usual confident voice. She attempted to shift the narrative by painting herself as a victim misunderstood, unappreciated, and just trying to build unity. But it was too late. A homeowner stood up and read from a prepared statement, laying out Karen's repeated abuses of power and violations of property rights. Then another shared how they'd been fined for non-compliant paint colors that weren't even listed in the HOA code. Another showed evidence of Karen forging a digital vote on landscaping standards that had never actually occurred. The breaking point came when the surveillance footage was shown projected for the entire room to see. There, in clear video and time-stamped audio, was Karen marching into the backyard, clipboard in hand, measuring the pool and barking orders to a contractor. The room erupted. What little support she had left disappeared in that moment. The board had no choice but to take action. A motion was raised and voted upon. Karen Whitmore would be immediately suspended from her role as HOA president pending full legal investigation and a vote for permanent removal. The motion passed unanimously, with cheers breaking out across the room. Karen's face drained of color as the reality set in her reign was over. The power she wielded through intimidation and manipulation had been stripped in a single, undeniable moment of public truth. But the consequences didn't stop at a suspension. The homeowner's legal team proceeded to file formal charges for trespassing, harassment, and defamation. A civil suit was launched not just against Karen personally, but also naming the HOA for failure to enforce checks and balances. As part of discovery, it was revealed that Karen had used HOA funds, dues paid by residents, portions of the failed pool party, the vendor deposits, the promotional materials, even the DJ. The misappropriation was grounds for financial restitution. The county registrar initiated an audit of the HOA's finances and voting records, and a full governance review began. New transparency policies were drafted, requiring every board decision to be publicly recorded and all votes to be traceable. Karen's dream of dominance had backfired in the worst way possible. Not only was she removed, but she had also triggered permanent reforms she could no longer manipulate. Meanwhile, the homeowner's reputation, once clouded by Karen's lies, was fully restored. Neighbors who once stood silent now expressed support. Many offered to help restore the backyard, bringing gifts, offering free repairs, and helping with landscaping. What began as a lonely fight had become a community reckoning and a reminder that silence enables abuse. Karen, once the loudest voice in the neighborhood, had vanished. Her house sat quiet, blinds drawn. Rumors swirled that she was selling. No one missed her dot, and though the pool remained dry for a while longer, it symbolized something more than recreation. It became a symbol of boundaries, rights, and the fall of a petty tyrant who tried to claim what was never hers. Months had passed since the spectacle that ended Karen's rule, but the ripple effects still shaped the neighborhood. Where there was once paranoia and silence, there was now cautious optimism. People talked more freely at HOA meetings, openly, questioned decisions, and demanded transparency. Community bulletins were no longer filtered through one voice. And perhaps most telling of all area elections saw record turnout. Residents had learned that apathy had a price, and that silence could be weaponized by those hungry for control. Karen never returned to another board meeting. Not once. After her suspension, she was formally removed from her position in a landslide vote. The board, now under new leadership, cooperated fully with auditors and legal investigators. Internal records showed a web of petty abuses, fines issued for non-existent violations, backdated approvals, and a disturbing number of lost complaints, all tied to properties that had previously challenged Karen's authority. The civil lawsuit proceeded smoothly. Karen's unauthorized use of HOA funds, false representation of HOA consent, and trespass onto private property were clearly documented. She had no legal defense beyond flimsy misinterpretations of bylaws that were never meant to override deeded property rights. The judgment required Karen to pay restitution, issue a formal apology, and attend a mandated community conflict resolution course, though it remained unclear whether she actually completed it. The HOA itself was ordered to reform its operating structure. Regular third-party audits were now mandatory. All official communication had to be archived publicly, and any board member attempting to act without full recorded consensus could be removed by resident petition. Karen's downfall forced the HOA to evolve into something it should have been all along, a body that served the residents rather than rule them. As for the homeowner, vindication was sweet, but they didn't stop at personal victory. They used the momentum to lead a reform committee. They helped pass new HOA clauses that prevented unilateral action by board members and ensured every homeowner knew their rights. Free legal clinics were hosted, and a digital resource hub was created to help residents understand how to challenge unlawful HOA actions. The movement they sparked didn't just change their block, it spread to surrounding neighborhoods. In a symbolic act, the homeowner refilled the pool, this time hosting a private, invitation-only gathering for close neighbors who had stood by their side during the ordeal. The water shimmered under the sun like a clean slate. Children splashed, laughter echoed, and food was passed around freely. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration of peace, of dignity, of boundaries long ignored. A few of Karen's former supporters tried to save face by claiming they were misled. Some apologized in person, others through awkward gestures like leaving potted plants or cards. The homeowner accepted most of these attempts with grace, though they never forgot who stayed silent when it mattered most. Forgiveness was offered, but trust would take time. Karen quietly sold her house. The "for sale" sign appeared late one night and vanished within days. She moved out with no farewell, no explanation. A moving truck arrived before dawn, and by midday the house was empty. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, not in celebration, but in stunned relief. Her exit, like her leadership, was marked by secrecy and denial. The new family that moved in brought a completely different energy. Friendly, soft-spoken, and genuinely interested in building community, not dominating it. Within weeks, they hosted a modest backyard cookout, asking nothing of their neighbors except good conversation and shared laughter. No flyers, no vendors, no entitlement. Just kindness. The neighborhood changed in ways beyond policy. Front yards began to reflect more personality. Where once Karen issued warnings for unauthorized garden gnomes or non-regulation mailbox colors, now people expressed themselves freely. Bright flowers, quirky decorations, even murals started appearing. A neighborhood that had once felt micromanaged now felt alive. And the story of the drained pool, the moment that changed everything, became something of a legend. People told it at neighborhood gatherings, warning others about unchecked HOA power. Some even printed T-shirts with the phrase, "Private property means private." What started as a boundary violation became a rallying cry. The homeowner's life returned to a quiet normalcy, but they were forever changed. They understood the cost of standing up, but also the reward. They had seen how quickly one person's ego could infect an entire system, and how powerful truth could be when wielded with evidence and resolve. They became a trusted figure, not because they sought attention, but because they earned respect. In the end, it wasn't just about a pool. It was about the line between community and control, between influence and intrusion. Karen had blurred that line until it snapped, and when it did, it exposed every crack she'd tried to hide behind HOA rules and fake authority. She claimed the pool as community property. But she learned the hard way that real communities don't need to steal to come together. And that no matter how deep the pool, integrity goes deeper.